Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director, Events Programming at Media Post, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. I have with me Radhika Duggal. She is the CMO of Super.com. Hey, Radhika.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you were able to do this. You came highly. You were one of the recommends. And sometimes I search, seek out people. Sometimes I meet people at events, and then for you, you were recommended. And after looking through you and all your LinkedIn page and everything, and your blogs, you do so much amazing blogs. Just what everything is just really impressive. So I was really glad to have the opportunity. And I can't not say this. We both said, "How are you?" Um, Gave us our little rote answers. I did read your blog, and I'm sure everyone else saw Elmo writing, how are you? And he sort of got bashed for that. I mean, talk about that. I mean, just we're not going to, because obviously everyone goes into a lot of it, but just in the sense of when you want to talk to someone, especially when you're regarding your team, you are the person who's responsible for your team members. Is that how important is that to be aware of that and to truly mean it instead of just, like in the grocery store, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I would say the importance of connecting with people and really being people feels to me a little bit like it's gotten away from us in the past 1 to 4 years. Maybe some of it started with the pandemic, with us sort of being home and closing in on ourselves a little bit more and our families a little bit more. And I feel like to some degree, we've never recovered from that. So I think, and I'm so sorry, by the way, I live on the second floor in New York City, so there's an ambulance outside or a fire truck. My
No
apologies.
worries at
But
all.
I feel like we just have not recovered from that. And maybe something of what has exacerbated this trend is, the market being what it is today, we're seeing companies downsize, we're seeing a lot of volatility. And I just feel like, oh, it's a tough time to be a team member. It's a tough time to be a working parent. It's a tough time to be new to the workforce.
Mhm.
And sometimes I just feel like by simply asking, how are you? Hold for the fire truck. By
Mhm.
simply asking, how are you? Maybe we can help people feel less alone.
Yeah. No, and I do agree. I mean, I do think it becomes, and I think it needs to not be wasted, or maybe not wasted, because it does sort of annoy me when I'm in the grocery line. How are you? I'm like, really? Do they want me to suddenly say, uh, having a problem, have been fight, like whatever? I don't think, and so that's just a politeness. But I do think when it's people who you're in your orbit on a daily basis, and especially people you feel somewhat responsible for, then it's about listening to them and just being aware. And I think having that awareness makes a huge difference for all of us to just be to sort of checking in on each other.
Yeah, and I think to your point about the grocery store, I say this as kind of like a fun fact, but I used to work at a cash register in a grocery store. I was a really young child, and we can talk about that. And I will tell you that if you asked, how are you at the grocery store at the little tiny town in which I got the opportunity to work the cash register, people would tell you. And they would tell you because you had a relationship with them. They
Yep.
came in every day, they bought the newspaper every day, or they bought the same chicken salad sandwich every day. And even that interaction matters. As like as a team member or as a leader, having someone to answer that question, I don't care where they are, whether they're your family, whether they're your partner, whether they're the person at the grocery store. I think having that connection with someone is what's
Mm.
important. I
Yeah.
don't think it always has to be your team leader.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Like just to allow that connection to be there, especially as you said, it's not necessarily someone that you're working with, but if you are, seeing them each day in the grocery store or whatever it may be. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Which
Relationships can come from everywhere.
yes, that is true. And it does make a difference when I do, like sometimes I can get in my own world. And when I do open up, like even just getting in the back of a taxi, I remember one time and I actually I usually put my earbuds in, but I
Yep.
actually spoke and communicated with him. And it was just like, I get out of there feeling so much better. Like, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden I was in a good mood because I connected, I guess, with someone I will never see again, but it just was that engagement.
I can't agree with that more, that sometimes the engagement with someone you don't know is equally valuable as the engagement with someone you do know. Sometimes you learn from someone you don't know, like your taxi driver, for example. a very interesting or difficult story that they lived through that might be similar or different from your own. I've had that exact experience pretty recently.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just feel a connection because it's really nice to just talk and have someone be there to listen. I think that's what's missing. That's why everyone reacted to Elmo on Twitter. It's because they just wanted a place to talk and a person or a thing in this case to talk to. And that feels like a little bit of what's missing. And that's a gap or a void that we as team leaders can absolutely fill.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, super.com, I mean, that is obviously it's especially nowadays with people tightening their budgets, it's obviously something that people can get a lot of value out of. But the one of your slogans is have a make every day super.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to not talk about super.com, but talk about your day. What makes your day super?
I'm really, really fortunate because there are so many things that make my days joyful. So I'm going to list a couple of them, but I'd love to then tell you like why. So like first and foremost, I love hearing my daughter ask an inquisitive question. She's almost 4. Um,
Oh,
and I love the idea that she's cute and she's adorable, whatever, but she's like a intellectually curious human being. And I like to talk to her like she's my peer and really explain things to her. Nothing makes me happier than that. I
that's
love
awesome.
catching up with my wonderful husband at the end of the day, who admittedly, like, we don't have a ton of time to do that. And he's an incredibly supportive person in my life. I love spending time with my team and hearing about the incredible things they accomplish and the barriers they overcome in which to do so in a very tough, you know, market environment for tech. I love talking to my parents and my brother and my friends on the phone. And honestly, I love just taking a walk in New York City. This place makes me so happy and so energized. And I could keep listing things. And I'll say that um, I very selfishly cultivated a lot of things and relationships that bring me joy because I'm very nervous about the idea that you fill up your whole cup with one relationship or one thing or one place. And so I've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort in investing in all of those different things. And I feel very fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And I do think that there is an energy. And when I first moved to New York City, I don't no longer live in the city. And honestly, I don't know if I have that in me again. Like I'm now in the outskirts of New York. I like having my car. But when I first moved there, didn't know a soul, but there was an energy that it just made you alive. It just made you excited. Like you can do anything here.
I grew up in this little tiny town, and there was something about when I moved here, it was terrifying. Don't get me wrong. It took me a little bit of time to form this opinion,
Mhm.
but now I just feel like everything is possible here. And if we joke about that, my husband and I joke about this all the time. He's like, I just imagine you walking down the street with a huge smile on your face, no matter what's happening around you. And he's right. There's
Mhm.
something about feeling like anything is possible in the place where you are that is so unique to here. And it really does. Like I have a bad day at work, I take a walk outside and everything is better.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, I think it's if you because you're going out, as your husband said, with that huge smile. I think you get like even when I go back to visit the city, because I've been pretty bi-coastal between California and New York, and when I go back to the city, all of a sudden I'm walking around in that, okay, I'm back and whatever, as opposed to when I lived there, I was probably like, all right, get to the subway. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you don't remember, but I was suddenly people were so much nicer to me when I would come back to visit, or you know what I mean? Or just my interactions were better. Like I think it's what you put
Yeah.
out there that then you get back.
Yeah, I think that that's really fair. I think that's probably true in almost every aspect of your life, right? Like with every relationship, what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, talking about back to the careers and getting started and why as I said, I was so impressed looking at your resume and Deloitte, Pfizer, Chase, here you are now at super.com. I mean, you have had this incredible career with different brands and marketing, but on the sort of on the business side, more or at least from what I'm seeing, you tell me. But it's so was that the plan when you were graduating college? Were you okay? I'm going to be a marketer in business. Am I going to be a business person? Like, what was the plan to what you were looking for? And then talk about your path to getting where you are today.
I am oddly one of those people that is relatively on plan. And I feel like that's rather rare. And I'd credit my parents with this 110%. I think they were very insightful as I was a young adult trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college and what I wanted to do after college. They were very, they had the foresight to help me create a career path and see what that could look like, imagine what that life could be like. And then importantly, and I would say they still do this today, help me make each step of that journey to get to the next place. And so one thing I will say before I answer your question very directly is I would credit any success I've had to their mentorship and their guidance and their like love and endless support. And I know that not everybody has that benefit, but I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here. So I would say, along with the love and endless support was also like very clear direction. They said, you should go to a business school, which came after a very embarrassing collapsing incident when I went to a pre-med program and we were talking about blood. Like very publicly, I was giving a presentation about hemophilia and I literally collapsed. So we ruled out medicine very quickly.
Yeah, maybe not doctor.
So, yeah, not gonna be a doctor. So there, and luckily my brother's a doctor, so we're cool. We got one in the family. But they said, okay, you're going to business school and you can be one of two things, an investment banker or a management consultant. You pick. So many choices. So I picked. And I picked and it was, the conversation wasn't like that, but to some degree it was. And so I picked consulting but what I did know in that business program, as I was going for consulting internships, I was studying different business disciplines. And what I knew was, oh, well, accounting, not for me. Finance, kind of interesting. Statistics, kind of interesting. But marketing was cool because it was both creative and numerically oriented. And I liked the blending of the two disciplines so much. So I chose consulting. I chose to focus on marketing. And I took that consulting background and kind of used it to develop a very well-rounded marketing career. And I say that in two ways. I was rather intentional about two things. Number one, working in very different types of companies. So I spent about a third of my career as a management consultant, a number of years working in big Fortune 100 companies, Pfizer, JP Morgan Chase, and a number of years working in small companies, startups with 40, 50, now 250 people. And that discipline of working in different types of places, I think has helped me to develop a sense of resilience. The second thing I'll say is I also was very fortunate to have the opportunity to intentionally develop a well-rounded marketing career. So I think this idea that a CMO is like an artist or a scientist is a bit silly. A CMO has to be able to understand lower funnel growth marketing and creative and research and all of the other disciplines that report into them. And they are very varied and they are very different. And so I've had the opportunity to do a lot of those roles as an individual contributor. So in a lot of ways, my path was really clear and really structured, but did I know I would be at super.com in college? No, of course not. Did I even know I would work at JP Morgan Chase? No, but I knew I wanted to work in marketing. I knew I wanted experience in the different facets of marketing. And I really benefited from having, my hands held along the way from my family and from mentors.
Well, and I want to, because, and then it's go back. If I were to ask you what advice you would give, but I want to back it up because all right, someone wanting to be you, the advice you would give them. And you said something early on, you said you had very particular goals, or you knew what you needed to do to get to a particular goal. And I don't think it was the goal of being at super.com, but it's more, maybe not even being a CMO, but being whatever that next step is or where that next area needs to be. But how did you get that? So someone just starting out, someone wanting to be you, and maybe they are as focused, no, I want to be you. So I want to be on, no business and also no marketing, but how do you know those individual steps to know what to do to get to that?
I want to answer your question in two ways, because I want to answer that if someone is just starting out and they know they want to be a CMO, here's like three pieces of advice. I want to answer that. But before I answer that, I would preface it with the knowledge that I was really lucky very few people know what they want to be when they grow up. And I think that that's okay. I'm an adjunct professor at NYU in the Stern School of Business, which is actually where I went to undergrad. So it's wild that they let me in the building to teach people there. But I don't teach undergrad anymore. But when I did teach undergrad, I would talk to these just incredibly bright students who worried that they didn't know that they wanted to be a CMO when they grew up. They didn't know what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I would just say that it's very rare for someone to have had some like career path laid out. And, you know, if I think about the advice I would give one of my students or my daughter, I would say, do the things that make you happy.
Mm.
Have a sense of what it is that makes you happy. Like be really thoughtful about that problem and then solve for that. Because I think that's actually more important than having a stake in the ground around I want to be a CMO or a chief product officer or whatever the job title is. And we can talk about how a framework for knowing what makes you happy. But I also want to answer your question very specifically, which was like, okay, if someone knows they want to be a CMO, then like, what advice do you give them? I'd say a couple of things. Number one, and probably first and foremost, if you want to be a CMO, but maybe if you want to be anyone in the business world today, is build a capacity for resilience. Marketing in particular, I feel like that's a poorly understood discipline across many types of businesses. It's well understood in some companies and not in most, particularly the varied disciplines within marketing. And I'd say if you are a CMO, you're going to every day be reproving the worth of yourself or members of your team or subgroups within your team. And having that capability for resilience in order to do that and live through that every day is incredibly important. For me, I think resilience is about controlling what you can, adapting your expectations to the situation because things change, the markets change so much. We're in an entirely new situation, but adapting your expectations to that situation and then being really freaking persistent and not giving up. My dad used to tell me as a kid, never give up. And he's totally right. Like, why give up? There's no fun in that. So
No.
that's one thing I would say. Secondly, if you want to be a marketer, I'd say intentionally develop a well-rounded marketing career. You can't just be, someone focused on, you can't be like an email marketing channel manager and have that enable you to grow. You can live a very fulfilling and exciting life and have your career be email marketing. And like, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to be a CMO, having breadth, I think is really important. And then the last thing I'll say is just be open to feedback and change. I learn so much from every person on my team and those not on my team at super.com. From the most junior person I have the pleasure of coming into contact with every day, to our CEO, to our board members, and everyone in between. But I think that's because I know I have so much to learn and they have so much to teach me. If I closed my eyes to that, I'd probably waste a lot of time, actually. And that's not worth that.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a good point. Like in terms, like as you said, even if you want to be a CMO, still be open to other things because you don't. I had my direction. I was fairly like you. I knew I wanted to be a reporter since I was in junior high. Like that was my thing. But I did. There were different versions of it, and this is a different version of it. And I wouldn't envision this. So it's like you kind of need to follow or be resilient and be able to pivot and really be open to other opportunities, but then to gauge what you need to do at that moment and
That's right.
just keep trying or just keep doing what you need to do. So, well, you talk about being resilient, which obviously this is something that, as you said, as a marketer, you need to be. You need to be able to adapt. But is there something that people, when they first meet you, that maybe get wrong about you? What's their first impression that might not be on the dot?
I don't know if this is a first impression, but perhaps in my current role, you might not expect this. In almost every role except for one, I've gotten the feedback that I need to speak up more and have a louder voice. And I actually just don't agree with that. I think people need to use their voice very intentionally when they have something additive to say and not in a reactionary way. So people often say like, oh, she's shy or, oh, she doesn't have an opinion. Now, I just think the reality is I use my voice, or I should use my voice when it can make impact. And I should shut my mouth when I cannot make impact. And I think I think when we tend to meet people in executive roles, they they think like, oh, that person got there by being the loudest person in the room or one of the loudest people in the room. And I just think maybe being the most thoughtful person in the room and the most intentional person in the room is a better path.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I do think people sometimes just want to say something to, I mean, sometimes you do need to be heard, especially if you're trying to be noticed when you're starting out, and when you're trying to build your career. But I think that just saying something for the sake of it, it's not going to offer value. So I don't think that offers a valuable opinion of you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I would say it is actually quite hard when you're just starting out to know when to be heard and how to think of the right thing to say. So something I used to do, and when I'm new in a role, I actually still do, like I still did it when I joined super.com early on. I did it when I joined JP Morgan Chase early on, is I would look at my calendar the night before and I would prep for every meeting. You know the topic, come with data, come with something intentional and additive to say. And what I think you find very quickly is if you earn the reputation of being prepared,
Hmm.
speaking when it makes sense and there's something to say, people start to look to you for your expertise and ask for your opinion because you're always the thoughtful person in the room. And I just think like a little bit of preparation goes a long way.
No, I totally agree. I think people not well, people respect that, but also people feel valued. It's just, if I were to come in to interview and knew nothing about you, really, what type of how am I respecting you or
Yeah.
respecting your time? You know what I mean? So I think that, and that goes with, obviously this is to talk about, an interview, but that goes, as you said, for a meeting, for anything. I think it's showing people you value their time to want to bring something to the table.
I think that's totally right.
So, but all right. So I was always do my snooping, and I noticed with one of your blogs, as I mentioned, you write so much and comment. I love, like, if I haven't already clicked to follow you, I am going to be following, because I think it's really
Please.
interesting, everything you've been adding. But that said, one of the blogs was about gig work, and
Yeah.
for people who aren't in the business or whatever, just it's that work to get a gig here, like, whether it be a writing gig or an acting gig or particular job, it's short term, it's not necessarily being hired by someone full time. That said, your blog was about the most popular gigs. Well, I want to ask you, when you, and I know you mentioned about working as a cashier. So well, in fact, you could elaborate on it, but just what's the oddest gig you had that, before finding your success in your path?
Yeah, so I'll be really honest, like I grew up in a time when gig working wasn't a thing in the way that it is termed today, but it actually, in my opinion, it's always been a phenomenon and we just didn't name it something and
Hmm.
maybe highlight it quite as much. But as a child, I grew up working from the time I was like 8 years old. My parents had a convenience store, and I now realize this might have been a ploy to not have to have childcare. Like I realize this as a parent myself, but that's okay. Over the summers, I would have the opportunity to run the cash register at one of my parents' stores. My dad worked his full-time job at a company called Corning Incorporated, and my mom quit her full-time job to essentially manage the stores. And so I would go to work with her, and she would do more managerial duties while I would literally run the cash register from like, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock to 3 p.m. roughly is when we would go home. And it was cool. It was cool for so many reasons. First and foremost, I had the privilege of spending time with my mom and like, I don't know, that's pretty amazing. Um, I got to see firsthand what her life was like and quite frankly, how difficult it was to manage a business. This is like entrepreneurship before we kind of made tech entrepreneurship cool. This was own a franchise, be on your feet for 12 hours a day, stock the cooler, count the beer cans. She did all those things. And I really have just a ton of respect for her grit and her hustle and determination. The second thing I learned is my parents paid me for that time. So interestingly, they didn't pay the babysitter, they didn't pay the summer camp, they paid me.
Right.
So I would keep a notebook every day. I got paid $11 a day for that work. I have no understanding if that was minimum wage or not. It's unclear. But I was 8, so I don't think it mattered. $11 a day for a whole summer was a ton of money as a kid.
Hmm.
And what my dad did, and I was again really young. I was 8 when I started. probably the last year I did it, I was like 12 or 13. Um, he got me a credit card. So instead of saying, I'm gonna give you $11, we go to the bank every day with your $11, he got me a credit card. And we talked a lot about, a credit card is sort of like an open checkbook. But we
Mhm.
talked about really early on the responsibility that comes with having this credit vehicle. And he normalized the idea that you have access to a line of credit. So I didn't like go to college and overspend because I had a sense of what a responsibility it was earlier on and what a privilege it was. The other thing is, quite frankly, I was building credit then from the time I was 8. He didn't get it for me when I was 8, but 9, 10, whatever the age was.
Right.
That is such a huge important thing for parents to do to their kids. Fast forward 2018, 19, 20, I worked at Chase and I had the opportunity to help to launch a product for kids aged 6 to 17. And it was essentially a debit card and a bank account. And people sort of scoffed at the idea, like, why does your 6-year-old need a bank account?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, when I was 8, I learned about credit. And
Yeah.
those are lessons that have stuck with me for the rest of my life. So it's crazy to think that first job, 8 years old, run the cash register impacts what you do, call it 30 years later, but it really does. I'm really grateful for that experience.
No, I think that's awesome. And I do agree. I think that, I mean, one, getting that credit history started
Oh
right
my
there
God.
is amazing.
Yeah.
But also, as you said, it gives you that responsibility. It shows you it's not a lot of people, like you mentioned, going to college, whether it be money or maybe you were sort of sheltered and not allowed to get out a lot, you tend to go a little overboard, when you
Yeah.
go to college, if you weren't being taught or being shown those things all along the way. And that's the best time to do it when they're there. I also love, and I'm curious your thoughts, and I'm sure, like as you said, you saw your mom working every day and being a part of that and seeing her career and her being a mom. And how did that impact you and in terms of and the way you want to impact your own daughter. You know what I mean? Like watching a woman strong work, do the job, but then also be your mom. And now you're there.
I think a couple of things. So actually what I thought I would want to do when I had my daughter is, um, work a little bit less, take a little bit of a step back, spend all of my time with her. And quite frankly, I do still want to spend all of my time with her, I'm not gonna lie, but I don't think I best serve her by doing that. And I think this is something I learned from my own mother, which was having a little bit of more of a multifaceted life is a lesson to teach, particularly your daughter. I don't have a son, but if I did have a son, I imagine it's not the same.
Mhm.
Girls, I think, just have so much pressure to be good mom and good wife. And what I feel in the last, call it 3.5 years since she's been born, is I need to show her not just how to be a good mom and good wife, but how to go do all the things I want to do,
Mhm.
how to make all the impact I can make in the world. Because her job as someone who will grow up with a ton of privilege is make all the impact she can.
Yeah.
Whether that is by being a good mom and good wife, that's equally worthy, whether that's by being a CMO, whether that's by being a philanthropist, like whatever it is that she wants, I hope she has the privilege to choose. And I hope she looks back at the time we spent together and reminds herself that I chose what was right for me and she gets to do the same thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful because it is true. It's everyone has their own path, but to see a strong woman,
Yeah.
their mom, and what you do and how you're enjoying your life and how you're having all different things, aspects of your life. And I think that's such a great role model for your daughter to see.
Oh, and by the way, my mom used to literally stock shelves and count beer cans that had beer in them still. If my mom can do that, I can do this.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's wonderful. I have to also say, I noticed with one of your LinkedIn posts, you wrote these three things. So you wrote, "We can all learn from anyone, anywhere." So why don't we go step by step? So you can
Okay.
learn from anyone, anywhere. What? So my question to you is, what and whom did you learn from recently? And someone who it's more not your boss, not your,
Yeah.
someone who might just been a random person in your life, but you learned something, were able to take something away.
Yeah. I think what maybe something that's like interesting here is the intentionality in how you learn from anyone, anywhere. So when I worked at Chase, one of my first jobs there was to help um, grow their college checking account business. And, some of the, it's marketing, right? So a lot of that is about how do you connect with these students. And we were thinking about content, we were thinking about new marketing channels, we were thinking about branch, we were thinking about all of these different things. And what I realized is like, I had been out of college for like 20 years by then, or something, not 20, but some very long period of time. And I didn't know how to connect with students in a real way, not in the way that you do market research to like learn what people care about, and
Mhm.
really different if you're in the ecosystem of the culture as opposed to like trying to learn about it through statistically significant quantitative research, which is how we make decisions. So I asked somebody in my class at that time, I was teaching undergrad, to be my Gen Z mentor. And literally, she just I hung out with her and her friends for, call it a year and a half, not all the time, not every day, but like she'd invite me along to things. I would chat with her. I would like go to lunch with her and her friends, and just being part of her ecosystem and infrastructure and life opened up my eyes to, what is it like to be 20 and a sophomore in college and learning how to budget for the first time with no resources, no
Right.
parents to help you or no friends that have knowledge. Um, and what? All she asked for in return was like a little bit of career advice. What a cool relationship I had the privilege of being part of. And, she was like literally a 20-year-old.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, the fact that you go out and do that, I mean, because as you said earlier on, you always have to be learning, and to find the different people that you can learn from is always, it's not always who you expect.
It's not always this, like the thing especially as the CMO, it's not always the senior person. It's not always the board member. It's not always the CEO. For the CMO, it's always your customer. And I think that being able to immerse yourself in who your customer is and really learning what it's like to be them. Some companies use ethnographies, some companies don't have money for ethnographies, right? Where you're like in your customer's home, immersing yourself in it. So you go out and you get your Gen Z mentor and you go to lunch with them. But figure out who your customer is, learn from them, see what their life is like, and then you can act on it and you can do things to help them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we have three things, but I just to keep asking you so much. But I want to wrap it with this last question. One of the things you said, be perfectly imperfect. So what does that mean to you? And how are you perfectly imperfect?
Oh my God, I am imperfect in every way. And I think being a parent has taught me that that's actually very much okay. And you really don't need perfection, because actually I don't know what the definition of perfection is in most situations. For me, this is about prioritization. Do the most and the best that you can at a very few or small number of things, and be really present in those situations. Everything else, the 80% solution is just fine. Or the 0% solution is fine. So for example, when I am with my daughter, I'm not on my phone and not at my computer. I am with my daughter.
Mhm.
When I am at work, I am at work. I am unfortunately not with my daughter,
Right.
because those things really matter, right? And for me, I need to give things my full attention. But that comes at the expense of something. We don't make our bed. Like, I'm not joking. We don't make our bed. We don't put our clothes away, because to try to do all those things means it would have to come at the expense of something that actually matters to us. Those things matter to other people. So like, you should do the things that matter to you. But for me, so much about life in the last couple of years with my daughter has been letting myself off the hook, letting myself be imperfect at things, but really focusing on the things that matter to me.
No, I get that because the time it would take you to say make the bed or
Mhm.
clean the sink, the dishes in the sink, or some whatever it may be, is time taken away from your daughter.
Yeah, the 5 minutes to make the bed is one song less we sing in the morning.
Yeah,
I don't care. I'd rather sing the song.
that makes total sense. Oh, Veronica, thank you so much. You were awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so nice.
Good, I'm glad. And thank you for watching. As I always say, if you have a marketer, a woman marketer who you are as impressed with as we are, then please let me know and I will do my best to talk to them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks again.